The prison is not a place for intimacy, but a place meant for correcting those who have committed crimes and for them to reflect on their criminal actions. However, some men in charge of the safety of female prisons go beyond guarding the inmates. From Fred Wey, a trusted security chief who turned his office into a meeting place for intimate encounters, to Eugenio, whose relationship with an inmate led to his downfall. Others, like Willie Williamson, exploited their positions in ways that will leave you shocked to engage with multiple inmates while at Lowell Correctional Institution, and all of these were caught on camera. Fred Wey. Fred Wey, the former security chief of the Delaware Women's Prison, was sentenced to a year probation after having sex with a 27-year-old inmate who often visited and cleaned his office. Wey was arrested in July after a state police investigation found that he had sex with an inmate on at least 2 occasions. In one incident, when Wey did not usually work, the inmate went to his office to clean it, authorities said. She closed the door, which is a violation of state prison policy that requires employees to prop open the door or have a witness in the room when they have an inmate in their office. The two then had intercourse. During his trial in court, he apologized to his family, turning to look at his girlfriend who sat in the courtroom. The two have a child together. The incident is one of several staff inmate sex scandals that have plagued Delaware since men began guarding female prisoners nearly a quarter century ago. The judge told the courtroom that Fred Wey exceeded the sentencing guidelines, which only called for probation, because it was unacceptable behavior by a high-ranking official of the Department of Correction. This case does not compare to the next case because the sex scandal was done openly until other inmates reported the affair to higher authorities. Eugenio. Eugenio, a man who once held a position of authority and trust, found himself at the center of a scandal that would forever tarnish his reputation. As a corrections officer at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in North Las Vegas, Dimas found himself in an affair with an inmate named Monique Maestas. Maestas, who was incarcerated for her role in the brutal murder of a 3-year-old child, was not the type of inmate with whom a corrections officer should become involved. Yet Dimas allowed himself to be drawn into a relationship that would ultimately cost him his career and his reputation. Officials said an inmate at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center tipped them off to Dimas's relationship with Monique Maestas. The tipster warned a prison commander that a jealous Maestas might attack a third inmate who had allegedly been flirting with the guard. Several inmates claimed Dimas and Maestas were having sexual relations in a pod at the Women's Correctional Center. 2 inmates said they walked up on Dimas and Maestas standing closer than appropriate, which suggested something sexual was going on between them. According to documents, officials found Dimas's cell phone number written on a post-it note inside her prison cell and confronted her about it. She initially denied the accusations, but later admitted to having a sexual relationship with Dimas. The corrections officer told state investigators there was no affair, but acknowledged giving Maestas a pendant of the Egyptian cross known as an ankh, along with pictures of him and his family and his cell phone number. And according to court documents, Officer Dimas was heard telling Maestas he loved her, missed her, would kiss her all over, made plans for the future, and indicated they would be together. Officials say Dimas was placed on leave, arrested in February and fired in April 2013. This case is still not as intense as the next one because in the next case, the correctional officer got intimate with several inmates. Willie Williamson. Once a trusted correctional officer in Hamilton County, Williamson's name became synonymous with scandal when he was found guilty of engaging in sexual relations with inmates at the Western Massachusetts Women's Correctional Center in Chicopee. The charges against Willie Williamson were both shocking and deeply unsettling, casting a spotlight on the serious breach of trust within the correctional system. As a correctional officer at the Western Massachusetts Women's Correctional Center, Williamson was entrusted with the safety and well-being of the inmates. However, the allegations that surfaced revealed a disturbing pattern of misconduct that ultimately led to his downfall. Williamson was accused of engaging in sexual relations with inmates, a grave violation of both legal and ethical standards. The nature of these crimes was particularly egregious given the power dynamics inherent in a correctional setting. Inmates, by virtue of their incarceration, are in a vulnerable position, and any form of sexual contact between a correctional officer and an inmate is considered non-consensual under the law due to the inherent imbalance of power. The investigation into Williamson's conduct began after reports of inappropriate behavior surfaced, prompting authorities to take action. The allegations were taken seriously, and a thorough investigation was launched to uncover the truth. This investigation involved interviews with inmates and staff, as well as a review of surveillance footage and other evidence that could corroborate the claims. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Williamson had engaged in multiple instances of inappropriate conduct with inmates. The evidence gathered was substantial enough to warrant legal action, leading to Williamson's arrest and subsequent trial. trial. Following the guilty verdict, the court moved to the sentencing phase, where the judge considered the severity of the crimes and the impact on the victims. Williamson was sentenced to 60 days in the House of Corrections. The list takes a dark turn because in the next case, there is non-consensual sex involved. Lowell Correctional Institution officer. The arrest of the officer at Lowell Correctional Institution marks a significant and alarming chapter in the facility's troubled history. The officer, whose identity has been withheld pending further investigation, faces serious charges that have sent shockwaves through the institution and the wider community. The charges against him include multiple counts of sexual misconduct, specifically targeting 2 female inmates under his supervision and literally forcing himself on them. These allegations are not only grave, but also indicative of the systemic issues that have long plagued Lowell. The arrest followed an extensive investigation initiated after several inmates came forward with allegations of sex misconduct. These brave individuals detailed a pattern of predatory behavior by the officer, who allegedly exploited his position of authority to coerce and intimidate his victims. The investigation uncovered evidence supporting these claims, leading to the officer's arrest and subsequent charges. The case has drawn significant attention, both for the severity of the allegations and the broader implications for the institution. In response to the arrest, Lowell Correctional Institution has issued a statement acknowledging the charges and affirming its commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of all inmates. The institution has pledged full cooperation with the ongoing investigation and has taken immediate steps to address the situation. This includes placing the officer on administrative leave pending the outcome of the legal proceedings and conducting an internal review of the circumstances surrounding the allegations. It gets worse because in the next case, the guard has more victims of sexual misconduct than in this last case. Christopher S. Peck. Christopher Peck, who was a Sussex boot camp guard, had sex with female inmates and was sentenced to spend 3 years in prison, all of it likely to be spent in isolation because of the risk other inmates would harm a former correctional officer in their midst. Peck had pleaded guilty to 6 counts of having sex in a detention facility and 1 count of official misconduct. His attorney had asked the judge to impose a sentence of probation but no jail time, saying Peck was getting counseling for sexual addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. Peck was a U.S. Air Force veteran, his attorney said, and is only now going through therapy to handle the effects of sexual misconduct he suffered as a child. Peck told the judge he knew what he'd done hurt his family and said it had been a relief to face his problems after his arrest. "What I did was wrong. I was seeking affection in the wrong place and in the wrong way," he told the judge in court. A woman who testified at the sentencing hearing said she was one of the inmates Peck had sex with, and she denied that it was consensual. "I felt completely helpless," she told Judge Graves. "He had all the power in this situation," she added. Graves acknowledged in his sentencing order that Peck will likely be held in isolation, away from any other inmates. He sentenced Peck to 6 months in jail for each of the sex offenses, for a total of 3 years behind bars, in addition to time he must serve on probation. The next case gets more shocking because the guard got just probation without any serious consequence for his action. Basilios Hopos. In August 2013, a Baylor prisoner awaiting a hearing at the Newcastle County Courthouse performed oral sex on a Capitol Police senior security officer while she was in lockup. Basilios Hopos struck up a conversation with the inmate after she used a telephone, then took her to a small room where fondling led to sex, court records said. Hopos, then 47, admitted the sex act to police. He was later charged with that crime and with having sex with a second inmate in lockup that June, documents show. He pleaded guilty to sex in a detention facility, and prosecutors dropped an official misconduct charge. A judge gave him probation. The Moss report found that inmate, and staff inmate sex was prevalent at Baylor, a problem exacerbated by dysfunctional management under then-Warden Ryan, lack of training for all levels of staff, and no clear leadership on the issue. Inmates were reluctant to report sex misconduct, confused about how to complain, and lacked confidence that interventions will occur. The report said there was broad agreement that inappropriate relationships existed between staff and inmates. It appears many guards sometimes get a slap on the wrist for their sexual misconduct actions on female inmates, as can be seen in the next case. Larry R. Clinkscale. Clinkscale, a 12-year veteran who normally worked at a men's prison but was at Baylor on an overtime assignment because of short staffing, offered the woman money for sex, according to court records. Clinkscale summoned her to a staff restroom where he pulled her into a supply closet, began fondling her, and had sex with her on the floor, police said. Afterward, he ordered her to clean the mess up, records said. The woman collected DNA evidence using a brown paper towel and reported the incident. Even though Clinkscale was charged with having sex with the inmate and police said he confessed to the felony, then Attorney General Bo Biden's office indicted him on 2 misdemeanors: official misconduct and sexual harassment. Nicole Byers, spokeswoman for Biden's successor Matt Dehn, said lesser charges were pursued because the victim wanted to avoid testifying at trial. Clinkscale pleaded guilty to both charges and was put on low-level probation. It gets better in the next case because at least the assaulter does not get away with his crimes. Roger Tomkins. Roger Tomkins, a 22-year veteran who worked at the Women's Work Release Treatment Center next door to Baylor, coerced a woman into having sex with him 3 times in one day by saying he would be present at an upcoming disciplinary hearing and could send her back to prison. He twice had sex with her in the laundry room, during which he was interrupted by a radio call, and took her to a storage room to have sex a 3rd time. The inmate told him repeatedly she didn't want to have sex with him, said police, who recovered DNA from a semen-stained paper towel found in the storage room. Police leveled 2nd-degree sexual misconduct charges against Tomkins, who eventually pleaded guilty to having sex with her and was sentenced to 6 months behind bars. Anthony Antonio. The ACLU's 2009 lawsuit against the state claimed guard Anthony Antonio burst into a woman's cell after sending others in her tier to lunch, then forced her to give him oral sex. The lawsuit claimed sexual misconduct by guards was a widespread, chronic problem that was not often brought to the attention of police or prosecutors. The ACLU charged that prison investigators had substantiated more than 25 cases of sex by guards with inmates since 2000, but usually resolved them by letting the violator resign. Several more sex complaints could not be substantiated, the lawsuit said, ending the prison's investigation, even though officials knew that 99% of the time there may be an inappropriate relationship. Lawyers for the prison system argued that the lawsuit's claims were untrue, but Antonio's case was settled before the issue could be resolved. Antonio told police he wasn't the only sex violator, noting that a fellow guard was supposedly having sex with 4 or 5 inmates, the lawsuit said. That guard resigned days later, officials acknowledged, though no charges were filed. Also in 2009, a consultant hired by the state released a blistering report about sexual safety and security for inmates at Baylor, findings that became allegations in the Antonio lawsuit. Researchers for the Moss Group of Washington, D.C., were at Baylor interviewing staff and inmates just 10 days before Antonio committed his crime. The Antonio case raised broader questions about systemic issues within correctional facilities, paving the way for scrutiny into other allegations of sexual misconduct, such as those involving James Widen. James Widen. The allegations made by April Yost against James Widen are both shocking and deeply unsettling, painting a grim picture of life within the walls of the Huntington Work Release Center. April Yost, a woman who found herself entangled in the criminal justice system due to nonviolent offenses linked to her struggles with addiction, became the central figure in a scandal that would expose the vulnerabilities and power imbalances inherent in the correctional system. April Yost's account of her experiences with James Widen begins with a seemingly innocuous call over the intercom, summoning her to the laundry room in the dead of night. This was not an unusual occurrence, as inmates were often called upon to perform various duties at odd hours. However, what transpired that night would forever alter the course of her life. According to Yost, Widen offered her access to the cage, a small room with free washers and dryers typically reserved for new prisoners. This gesture, seemingly a favor, quickly turned sinister. Yost alleges that once inside the laundry room, Widen began to make inappropriate advances, reminding her of the favors he had done for her in the past. She recounts how Widen began touching himself, making it clear that it was time for her to pay for the privileges she had received. The case continues to crawl through the criminal court system. He vehemently denied the allegations, contending he was set up. While the Widen case highlighted the misuse of power by correctional officers, the allegations against Ricardo Hardy took a different turn, revealing financial transactions that facilitated inappropriate relationships. Ricardo Hardy. Ricardo Hardy, a 52-year-old former deputy corrections officer, was accused of engaging in inappropriate sexual contact with a female inmate. The DuPage County Jail, where Hardy worked, is a facility designed to house inmates awaiting trial or serving short sentences. It is a place where security is of utmost importance, and the staff is trained to handle a variety of situations with tact and precision. As a deputy corrections officer, Hardy was expected to uphold these standards, ensuring that the environment remained safe and orderly. Hardy's career at the jail was marked by his involvement in the daily operations of the facility. He was part of a team responsible for ensuring that the environment remained safe and orderly, a task that demanded integrity and professionalism. His access to various areas of the jail, including the commissary, placed him in a position of power, one that required a high level of trust and accountability. Despite the demands of his job, Hardy's career took a dramatic turn when allegations of misconduct surfaced. He stands accused of having inappropriate contact with a female inmate, a charge that has sent shockwaves through the community and raised raised serious concerns about the integrity of the correctional system. The allegations suggest a breach of trust and an abuse of power, as prosecutors claim that Hardy arranged for $300 to be deposited into the inmate's commissary account. Hardy's actions highlighted individual breaches of trust, but the lawsuit against New York prison guards exposed a pattern of abuse that happened in multiple facilities over years. New York prison guards. The federal lawsuit filed against New York prison guards for sexual misconduct with female inmates is a chilling account of abuse and betrayal within the state's correctional facilities. This lawsuit, lodged in federal court in Manhattan, represents a significant legal challenge to the practices and oversight within these institutions. It is brought forth by 5 courageous women, identified only by the pseudonyms Jane Stone numbers 1 through 5, who allege they were subjected to repeated sexual assaults by male prison guards. The allegations span several years and involve multiple incidents of sexual misconduct, including sexual misconduct and assault, at 5 different prisons across New York State. Among these are the Albion Correctional Facility, an all-female institution, and the Lakeview Shock Incarceration Facility in Brockton, which houses both male and female inmates. According to the lawsuit, the abuse was not a series of isolated incidents, but rather a pervasive issue that was allowed to fester due to systemic failures within the prison system. The plaintiffs allege that male guards routinely engaged in illegal sexual activities with female inmates, exploiting their authority and the inmates' lack of power to resist. These acts were reportedly carried out over long periods, with some victims enduring repeated assaults. One of the most damning aspects of the lawsuit is the accusation that prison officials were complicit in covering up these crimes. That is not too shocking, considering most of the correctional officers were in on the crime one way or another. The previous cases have been about the prison guards themselves sexually misconducting themselves with female inmates, but what happens when a guard accepts bribes for other male inmates to carry out these horrific acts on their female counterparts? We'll see it in the next case. Unlike the direct misconduct by the New York guards, the David Lowe case introduced a new dynamic, enabling inmates to commit terrible acts by providing them access to female inmates. David Lowe. The night of October 23, 2021, is etched in infamy within the walls of Clark County Jail. It was a night that began like any other, but quickly descended into chaos and horror, forever altering the lives of 8 female inmates. The allegations against David Lowe, a trusted correctional officer, paint a chilling picture of betrayal and abuse of power. According to the lawsuit, Lowe's actions on that night were premeditated and deliberate. It is alleged that he accepted a bribe of $1,000 from male inmates in exchange for the keys to the female inmates' cells. This transaction, seemingly inconceivable in a facility designed to protect and rehabilitate, set off a chain of events that would lead to a night of terror for the women involved. Once the male inmates had the keys, they gained unrestricted access to the women's cells. The lawsuit describes how the female inmates, referred to as Jane Does to protect their identities, were subjected to a series of sexual assaults and misconduct. The sense of security and safety that the jail was supposed to provide was shattered, replaced by fear and helplessness. The impact of that night on the female inmates cannot be overstated. They were left traumatized, their trust in the system irrevocably broken. The lawsuit details the emotional and psychological toll the incident has taken on the victims, highlighting the long-lasting effects of such a violation. The women, who were already vulnerable due to their incarceration, found themselves further victimized by the very institution meant to protect them. As of now, the case against David Lowe remains ongoing, with the legal process continuing to unfold. The Lowe incident illustrated corruption within facilities, but Anthony Martin's case extended these concerns beyond prison walls, linking misconduct to crimes committed off-duty. Anthony Martin. The initial allegations against Martin surfaced when several female inmates bravely came forward, accusing him of sexual misconduct. These women claimed that Martin exploited his position by creating special work assignments, which allowed him to isolate them from the watchful eyes of security cameras and other staff members. In these secluded settings, Martin allegedly coerced the inmates into unwanted sexual acts, using his authority as leverage. The allegations against Anthony Martin prompted a wave of scrutiny and a call for action within the legal and correctional systems. Initially, the response from the authorities and the Rikers Island administration was met with skepticism and hesitation. Despite the serious nature of the accusations, Martin managed to retain his position, highlighting a troubling gap in the system's ability to swiftly address such misconduct. Then, in March, while off-duty in Queens, he was arrested for allegedly a woman in the community. In that case, the district attorney moved swiftly. Martin was indicted by a grand jury in August for first-degree sexual misconduct and faces up to 25 years if convicted. This disparity story sends a chilling message that the dignity and rights of the incarcerated are worth less than those on the outside, said attorney Anna Cull, who is representing a woman who alleges Martin abused her while she was locked up. Martin's allegations were compounded by external crimes, whereas Jose Figueroa Lizarraga's case spotlighted the manipulation of prison infrastructure to exploit vulnerable inmates. Jose Figueroa Lizarraga. It was claimed that Jose had deliberately manipulated security cameras to create blind spots, allowing him to commit acts of sexual misconduct against a female inmate who was on a job assignment. This inmate alleged that she was forcibly taken into the guard's control room where the incident occurred. After reporting the incident, the woman was attacked again, the suit said, alleging that the second time, even her request for emergency contraception was ignored. She became pregnant and nearly died after hemorrhaging during childbirth. Figueroa Lizarraga also was prosecuted on criminal charges and pleaded guilty to a lesser crime of attempting to commit unlawful sexual conduct by a custodian. He was sentenced to 2 years probation in August. While Figueroa Lizarraga used blind spots in surveillance, Naki Nunley's case highlighted deliberate manipulation of work assignments to isolate victims. Naki Nunley, a former correctional officer at FCI Dublin, stands accused of sexual misconduct involving female inmates. He strategically used prison work assignments to isolate his victims, ensuring they were away from the protective gaze of surveillance cameras and other staff members. This manipulation allowed him to carry out his sexual misconduct with a sense of impunity, leaving the victims feeling trapped and powerless. The women, already vulnerable due to their incarceration, found themselves subjected to unwanted advances and coercion, their dignity and safety repeatedly violated. Naki Nunley, once a trusted correctional officer at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, found himself at the center of a scandal that would expose the dark underbelly of the prison system. His role at FCI Dublin was ostensibly to maintain order and ensure the safety of both staff and inmates, but instead, he used his power to exploit female inmates. Nunley's abuses in work settings set a troubling precedent, which was echoed in Andrew Jones's misconduct within the Federal Correctional Institution's kitchen operations. Andrew Jones. The allegations against Andrew Jones, a former supervisor at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, are both disturbing and revealing of the systemic issues within the correctional system. As a supervisor in the kitchen, Jones was entrusted with overseeing the daily operations and ensuring the safety and well-being of the inmates under his charge. However, the power he wielded in this position allegedly became a tool for exploitation and abuse. Victims of Jones's alleged misconduct have described a pattern of behavior that included inappropriate comments, unwanted physical contact, and outright sexual assault. These acts were reportedly carried out in secluded areas of the facility, away from the prying eyes of surveillance cameras and other staff members. The allegations against Jones have also had a broader impact on the correctional facility itself. The revelations of misconduct have led to increased scrutiny and calls for reform, highlighting the need for systemic changes to prevent future abuses. The institution was eventually shut down after the numerous controversies that emanated from it. The closure of the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin is a testament to the severity of the issue and the urgent need for action. The systemic issues exposed by Jones culminated in the closure of his facility, yet Shannon Carell's case, involving direct assaults at a smaller jail, revealed gaps in oversight at local detention centers. Shannon Carell. In a federal lawsuit, Christy Tuddy and Tina Artiglio claim they were assaulted in 2012 by former Mojave County Sheriff's Department detention officer Shannon Carell at the Mojave County Vanderslice Jail substation. The women claim the defendants failed to supervise 25-year-old Carell and that the substation jail is inappropriate for female detainees. Carell pleaded guilty in November 2012 to unlawful sexual conduct with Tuddy. 3 other felony charges were dismissed as part of the plea agreement, according to the complaint. Carell of Bullhead City later pleaded guilty to unlawful sexual conduct with Artiglio and was sentenced to prison. The complaint states, "If you enjoyed this video, do well to click on any of the cards displayed on your screen.